back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Oh boy, and just like that, we're back and we're set for Fight Night Picks ? Kicks. As always, one half your hosting duo, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, as always, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. And Matt, we have a card this weekend.
We certainly do.
It exists. It's a little bit lopsided due to the fact that we lost Askarov, Brandon Royval. But listen, I'm looking to bring in the Eagle powers, or at least the Falcon powers. I went with the Springfield Falcons jersey with the friggin' talons right on the stitched into the arms. Like, I'm feeling it. I want to punch up this week. I want to thank Lucas, Louis Bond, Gazo, Ricky, Donald Guys, Bartholomew of Haywood, Just My 2 Cents, Chad the UFC Dad, Wake Up the Uma, Andrew Jackson, Russ Goddett, CT710, and Orlando, who are hanging out in the chat so far. How are we doing? It is a little bit of an earlier one here on this Saturday, but of course you have UFC Fight Night, Grasso versus Araujo. It is the appetizer to UFC 280 next weekend. Matt, this is one of those cards that might have gotten forgotten by a lot of people. They're getting excited for the preview here now, but if you look on the UFC's YouTube page, I don't even know if this card exists. They're already just in full-bore marketing machine mode for 280 next weekend.
It's kind of like how if you turn on any television, you're already seeing Christmas commercials. Halloween hasn't even happened yet. Let's just get through that, and then we get to Christmas. It does feel like this card has been slightly overlooked, but I'm going to be honest, I'm not even a little bit more excited. I'm quite a bit more excited for this card than I was, even for the last card that we had, even with the, I guess, subtraction of Royval versus Askarov. That would have been a phenomenal fight, but I still think this card does have surprising depth to it, even though I know a lot of people out there aren't overly excited for this main event.
So what we're going to do, if this is your first time with Fight Night Picks ? Kicks, we definitely want to thank you and MPTV's over there in the comment section watching this at work. Hope I don't screw up the money. Let's get into it. Well, hopefully the bosses, I mean, if you're the boss, then go for it. If the bosses see this, hi bosses of MPTV. Matt, it's going to be one of those cards where we throw it on over to the Fight of the Night screen. We break down the entire card. We start from the bottom, get to the top. And the unfortunate thing as I preview that is that our Fight of the Night screen suffers a little bit because we did have Royval Askarov in there, but your fight in the co-main event slot, Cub Swanson, Jonathan Martinez, this is of course the recycled graphic from the start of the week. QMK, the 1080 by 1080 picks. We update the weights, but you look at it, Cub Swanson did weigh in successfully. Not an ounce of fat on the guy. Taking on Jonathan Martinez, who looked a little gaunt on the scales as he does at 135. So I think this is going to be a great fight. Make sure you fill out the poll that's here in that community tab, or in the comment section rather, the chat if you will, because we do have it up there, and right now the majority are going ever so slightly with Jonathan Martinez, so have your say there, but I think this is going to be an all-action type of fight. I love it. I think it's going to be fun.
It's a really volatile fight either way, because like you said, Jonathan Martinez does have a hard time making this weight, and of course Cub Swanson had a difficult weight cut to get down. I don't think he wanted to not speak at media day. That was probably just a byproduct of having a really tough weight cut. It really made me think of all the way back. Remember when Luke Rockhold fought Yoel Romero, and it was like right after the weigh-ins, and he still sounded like he had a frog in his throat, or like he smoked 10,000 cigarettes. Like, really hard weight cuts do have that effect on people, so hopefully Cub Swanson just shows up, and he can look like the fighter that we know and love at 145. And I think Jonathan Martinez is a great introduction for him at this weight class.
Todd trying to pump that algorithm saying, push the like button, why don't you?
Thank you, Todd.
We will look at our second pick. I mean, Matt, I threw this one in here. I thought, you know what? This is a great fight. This is like our alternate at the start of the week, so now it gets its due. Mano Martinez taking on Brandon Davis. And for Brandon Davis, you look at the end of his first UFC tenure. He went 2-5, of course, but you look at the split decisions that he had in the last fight on that contract, where the whole time going into the storyline, it was this guy's running marathons, not really training in the gym. He loses a split decision to Giga Chikadze, and I know for a lot of you out there, Giga Chikadze's chopped liver after he lost to Calvin Kattar, but I will say, for Davis, not the greatest run his first time out, but fought some decent competition, got the wins that you need to do to get back into the UFC, and then you just look kind of flat against Danaa Bakari. But I think Mano Martinez is one of those willing dance partners. Both of these guys love to bang, so that's what makes this one a fun fight.
Stylistically, these guys should bring out the best in each other. Mano Martinez, like you mentioned, he has huge power in his hands, loves to get the fight into boxing range, and that just so happens to be where Brandon Davis thrives as a fighter. So even if you don't think these guys are going to go on to be top 15 fighters or future champions, like, this is going to be a really entertaining fight for as long as it lasts, because Brandon Davis, I know he has been finished, but for the most part, he can take a shot to give his own, and I think that's the style of fight that we're going to get.
Clay hanging out over there in the chat. Yeah, it should be a really, really fun one. And CT saying that Brandon is so bad, but he's had 8 fights in the UFC, and I've had none. And I'm talking about him. So we'll get set for the entire card, Matt. Obviously, this one headlined by flyweights ranked in the top 10. Alexa Grasso taking on Viviane Araujo. But if we do start the card off at the bottom, Mike Jackson taking on Dead Game Pete Rodriguez, a fight that could take place at a local bar or a local, undercard of a card that, like Elite 1 MMA New Brunswick could have Mike Jackson and Pete Rodriguez, and people would be just tickled mild.
They'd be lukewarm about it, honestly.
They would. I mean, you look at this fight, for Mike Jackson, honestly should be 2-1 in the UFC, beat CM Punk, but tested positive for the sticky icky like Ricky Williams in like 2007, relegated to the CFL. So for Mike Jackson, comes back out, fights Dean Barry, and somebody filled up the comment section this week and said Mike Jackson was on his way to beating Dean Barry. Those shots, they counted. I don't know what fight that guy saw, but in that one, Dean Barry was starting to really go off as the round went on. He looked a little frazzled to start, like he had the octagon jitters, but then, of course, the eye rake, the nut shots, the accumulation of the illegal shots, ended up getting a disqualification win for Mike Jackson. I threw out that little snippet there, the Daniel Cormier snippet, where he was like, no, they wouldn't call this a disqualification. They would call this no contest. We were very surprised that it was a DQ win for Jackson. So ultimately, he gets another shot, taking on Dead Game Pete Rodriguez, a guy who trains out of Arizona, dominate MMA. And for Rodriguez, he fought a poor level of competition on the regional scene. He fought a better level of competition as an amateur and looked a lot more impressive there, accumulating a record. But as a pro, he was just vaporizing his opponents. Comes into the UFC, cannot get inside of the range of Jack Della. He gets eaten alive with the jab. His nose is a stick of butter. It's bleeding like crazy. And then finally, Della just unleashed a little bit of a combo, and it drops Rodriguez. That's the end of the fight. Good stoppage by the referee. But for Rodriguez, gets another opportunity. Full camp, not 8 days notice like his fight against Jack Della. He gets to take on Jackson. Just throwing it over to the comment section. Wake Up the Uma saying Martinez is a feather. Wait. I don't know. Maybe we're talking about Mano Martinez. We've got Prince Vegeta saying Mike Jackson, the CM Punk guy, Chick Magnet Punk. And you've got Russ saying Mike Jackson is the most unintimidating man. LOL. So Matt, what do you make of this one?
It should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, because we know what Mike Jackson's skills are as a mixed martial artist. He's a boxer. That's what they're going to bring up quite a bit. Joe Rogan said he has world-class striking skills. Now, I would disagree with that assessment of his skill set, but still, Mike Jackson can throw hands on the feet, and he does have good combinations. He is what you'd call like a loose striker. He moves in a very fluid way on the feet. But I still think Pete Rodriguez is the more skilled fighter in this matchup, and it's hard to just sit here and say that and have a lot of evidence to base it off of, because like you had said, he doesn't have a very good level of competition, and that's the thing. If you've watched fights for long enough, you realize that It really matters who these people beat on their way up to the UFC, so we know what trials and tribulations they go through and what kind of adversity they face before they get to the big show, so then we know, okay, how are they going to look when they do face that adversity? For Rodriguez, we haven't seen that yet, and I kind of compare him to almost like a poor man's Chaos Williams, because I do think Chaos is a more skilled fighter. He's shown a lot more levels to his MMA game, but still, he was on the regional scene beating a lot of guys in easy ways that he was supposed to, like Pete Rodriguez is, and I do feel like Rodriguez has the type of matchup where he can look very good at.
You know what's insane about what you just said?
What?
There could be a world where Chaos Williams fights Pete Rodriguez. They're in the same weight class. How wild is that?
I just feel like Pete Rodriguez would have to win 3 or 4 fights in a row, I feel like, to get to that level.
No, please asking the question that we need. Saying who would win in fights, Dean Barry or Pete Rodriguez if you match them both up? I think Dean Barry might win that fight, even though he got cut from the UFC because he got the disqualification against Mike Jackson. I think he just has a more complete skill set, that's all.
That's what we have to be honest about. Like, I like Pete Rodriguez in this matchup, but I don't think he's the most skilled guy in the world. Like, Madalena is one of the best prospects in the division, if not the best prospect in the division, so losing to a guy like that isn't necessarily just writing off your career, but it's not a great sign how he lost that fight. You're right, he really did get dominated by the range, by the jab, didn't have a lot of answers for that one area, so, again, with Jackson, I don't think there's going to be the repercussions for walking into his range like there were against a guy like Madalena, so I do expect Rodriguez to look much better in this fight.
If you have a look at the odds, best fight odds, just the average, Rodriguez open minus 400, minus 712, that's rich. That's just rich. Jackson open plus 300, now to plus 500. You have a look at Fight Night picks for the total vote. 76% going with dead game Pete Rodriguez. So again, let us know who you have in the matchup. For me, I've got Pete Rodriguez, and you talk about it with this guy. You look at the way that he strikes, and he mixes it up, head, body. I think he's one of the smaller guys that you're going to find in this weight class, but I do like that of Rodriguez. He does kind of swing out of his shoes, so you do worry if he goes for a blitz and of a finish in the first round, maybe gasses himself out, and Jackson is going to be able to out-cardio him, because you look at Jackson's skill set, and you talk about efficiency, this guy's a boxer who shoulder rolls and keeps his hands low. He is the picture of a guy that could go 5 rounds, and he's 1-1 with a no contest in MMA, and I believe his skill set translates to being able to fight out 3 rounds, so I do like Rodriguez, and by that extension, I think he's probably going to be able to get a finish, but minus 700 is too rich for my blood.
We talked about this fight for too long, Craig.
All right, Matt. Well, Malone Hart, the MVP,
Thank you, Malone Hart,
saying, welcome back, Allen Bros, hitting out the giant super chat. Matt, I'll throw the wings out there, the Springfield Falcon wings, and we'll move into our next fight. Now, Russ Gaudette threw it up there earlier and said, it's great to see everybody on weight, in shape, so on and so forth. CJ Vergara missed weight.
By a long shot, too.
Yeah, he missed the limit by 3 pounds. He showed up at 129. And if you look at Vergara, he had somewhat of a short notice getting into the UFC fighting Ode Osborne. But in that fight, he also missed weight, weighed 127.4. He weighed 126 when he took on Cledson Rodriguez. I thought he lost that fight. And now he's taking on Tatsuro Taira. So I'd really like to see what people are thinking in this matchup, because at Fight Night Picks, the total votes, 81% have Taira here. I think there's a lot of fighters on this card where you could go, hey, I can make a strong case for the underdog. And with a guy like CJ Vergara, I love the way that he finished off his last fight against Rodriguez. Round 2, round 3, I thought Rodriguez won, but Vergara was able to pull it out. And then Vergara against Osborne, he nearly had a 10-8 in the third round of that matchup. His ground and pound's great. The knee that he had against Bruno Correa to get the win on Dana White's Contender Series was great. I just think Taira can out-skill him with his grappling, with his takedowns, with his takedown defense. It's just, has Taira taken that level up in striking? Not only that we saw against Candelario, but can he move it forward even further? Because he's been training just out of Japan for this fight, where he was training in the States for his last fight.
I still feel like he can make those improvements. We're dealing with an extremely young fighter in Tatsuro, and that's why he is such an exciting fighter, to try to project where his ceiling could become. Because, okay, I know the flyweight division, the bantamweight division, the featherweight divisions, those smaller ones, they're not like heavyweight, where you can be good until you're 40. But when you have a fighter who's extremely talented in his early 20s, who has a good level of competition already on his record, he is undefeated, and he has shown improvements fight in and fight out, that finally is a prospect that you can get excited for. And I do agree with you, CJ is the type of well-rounded fighter who has good cardio, who they're always going to make you nervous when they do fight those really exceptional prospects who do have that blinding talent, but I just think Tatsuro is the type of talent who is going to get past that hump. Now, it is going to depend on who they match him up with next, because like we had mentioned earlier on in the prediction videos, there's not a lot of fighters in this division, so at some point, you're probably going to come up against one of the more recognizable names who has a much more well-rounded opponent game, who has the cardio to go 3 hard rounds, who defensively might be able to defend some of his better takedowns. So I do feel like we are going to get a lot of those questions answered sooner rather than later with Tatsuro. I just don't think this is going to be a matchup where we do learn them.
And I mean, I see it over there in the comments, like Raw Torque saying Tatsuro by sub, Russ is saying taking Tatsuro anyway, Orlando saying Tatsuro. You have a look at the odds in the matchup, and for Taira, he's a pretty big favorite, open minus 270, minus 270, or it's 266 is the average right now. Vergara open plus 230, plus 213, so the odds have shifted just a little bit. And
did Drake bet the bag on CJ Vergara? There was just a spike in the odds for no reason. That's
I saw OVOs getting the owl on the, is it the Barcelona?
People are mad about that.
Or is it, it's Barcelona
That's
jerseys.
pretty cool.
If you do like big Japanese prospects, and I see a couple of people, Mark in general, saying you got to toss more likes, you gotta bait the algorithm. But I'll give you a little bit of a nugget for next weekend. You have Yamato Nishikawa coming in with a wild record of 21-3-6, and he's only 19 years old. He took his first pro fight at 13.
That's wild.
His parents were just all about that life, like Raul Rosas Jr. So if you like Taira, you have another great Japanese prospect making a debut next weekend. Both of us going with Taira in the matchup. Matt, our next fight, Piera Rodriguez taking on Sam Hughes. This is the fight where I sit there and I'm on the fence, and I'll tell you why. I know Sam Hughes' record is 7-4, but just bring it back a little bit, because she was 5-4 not that long ago. She was on a tidy little 3-fight losing streak to kick off her UFC career, kind of like a Hannah Cipher streak, and I don't know what to think of Sam Hughes. I know all the skills are there. I saw them. But then you look at how they've translated, and the Tisha Torres fight, a little bit of an outlier, but then you go and you look at the 2-fight sample after that, and it wasn't great. So you pick it up, she gets a nice win, her second to last time out. She looked great her last time out against Elise Reed.
Do you ever feel like that meme of that guy standing in the corner, and they're like, they don't know I'm, and you're just like, they don't know I'm the internet's foremost expert on Sam Hughes, the UFC fighter?
I'm that guy. So for me, honestly, folks, like, I'm right on the fence about this fight, because I think for Sam Hughes, she's unlocked that Sam Page going to Fortis MMA, switching it up from the Pacific Northwest, getting away from the camp that she was at before, and she kind of touched on that, and it was pretty raw in some of those interviews. But for Piera Rodriguez, she trains with a lot of great women down in Southern California. She's decent with her wrestling, but not early on in her fights. It really is a kickboxing that breaders are bud.
Wow.
Butters are bread. So, Matt, for Rodriguez, she does have great striking. For Sam Hughes, she can mix it up at all the different levels. I want to see what people are thinking in this one, because I haven't seen anybody just yet.
I think this fight, more than any other, comes down to how early in the round Sam Hughes can go out there and get the takedown. Because with Rodriguez, I do think she is the much more damaging striker. Like, that's not a hot take. If you've watched any of her fights, you know that. So, I do think Rodriguez on the feet is going to be able to accumulate damage over time, which in a fight like this is going to be really important. Because if Hughes isn't able to get a load of control time, or really, really top-tier effective ground and pound or submission attempts, things that do account as effective grappling, and I mean overwhelmingly effective grappling, with like a minute, 2 minutes left in the round, then yes, maybe she can steal those rounds. But I think Hughes is going to have to go out there and really, for lack of a better term, just spam takedown attempts really early on, because if she can go out there, secure that takedown with 4 minutes on the clock, if she can control it for that whole time, I really don't think what Rodriguez does in the first minute is going to matter as much, and I think some of the control time of Sam Hughes can sort of outweigh the damage I believe Rodriguez is going to be able to do on the feet. I just think Rodriguez is going to be able to do more damage on the feet. That's the problem. I do understand the hesitation between these two, because it is a closely matched fight. And kind of like what we had said on the previous one, Vergara is the type of opponent who he can last late. He's well-rounded. It's kind of the fighter who can play spoiler for the type of underdog, or for the type of favorite that you can see having promise moving forward. But kind of similar to the last fight, I do think Rodriguez, with her striking advantage, is going to be able to do some damage on the feet. I don't think it's going to be like a Tisha Torres level of schooling, because that was on short notice, and that was just a huge step up in competition for Sam Hughes. But I still like Rodriguez in this matchup.
So we have a look. Clay saying Torres is a hell of a first matchup for UFC debut, and that one was on short notice. She's gotten way better in front of her eyes and is bigger and stronger. I think she out-muscles her for the win. You have a look at the odds. Rodriguez open minus 230. She's a minus 169, so the odds have come up on Sam Hughes, and Hughes open a plus 190. She's plus 140. I'm going to switch the pick, Matt. I think with that camp in Fortis MMA, I said at the start of the week I was on the fence about this matchup, but for Sam Hughes, she has cardio for days. She's going to be able to out-cardio most of the women in this division, and it's not just from her training, it's from her base coming into MMA. And you look at women in the strawweight division, the flyweight division, I always go back to, Matt, you're going to know this. What's Courtney Casey's background?
Courtney Casey. Oh, soccer.
Yeah, soccer's her background, but it shows because she tends to have decent volume and cardio to match, and I like Sam Hughes with that. I think for Rodriguez, she does come out of a great camp. Like I said, Black House MMA. She's got Tabitha Ricci to train with. She's got Sabina Mazow for the striking, but if you look at it, Sam Hughes can ground you out. You can't be a kickboxer when the distance is closed and you're backed up against a fence. So I will go with Sam Hughes in the matchup. Dave Baker hitting up the super chat. A pleasure to be listening again to QMK. Thanks, guys. Dave Baker is in the chat. He's in the comments section every single week with his pick. And people go after Dave because he'll post his picks and he'll post his record for the year. And they're like, but how do we know? How do we know? Where are your actual picks? He goes on every single video, every single week, and posts those picks. So Dave Baker, Malone Hart with a giant super chat, but Dave Baker is an MVP year-round with those comments. So again, I'm going to be going with Sam Hughes here.
I really hope the switch curse is back then, because this time it's going to play out in my favor.
It's been working out good for me lately. Matt, Joanderson Brito is taking on Lucas Alexander.
A banger of a fight.
What an odd one on short notice, eh? Because you had Melzik Bogdasarian, who was supposed to take on Brito. Bogdasarian breaks his hand. In steps Lucas Alexander. And we said this earlier about Pete Rodriguez. We're taking him to beat Mike Jackson, but he didn't beat anybody on the regional scene. Lucas Alexander has a shot against Joanderson Brito, didn't fight anybody on the regional scene.
I will say, though, this skill set that he demonstrated on the regional scene is a higher level skill set than what Pete Rodriguez did. I still feel like what he's able to do on the feet is a lot more technical. He can kick moving forwards and backwards. And for a guy to have that level of balance, to be able to basically walk on his back foot and throw head kicks off the front one, like, that's kind of incredible. We don't really see that all that often.
And I said one thing in our video breakdown earlier in the week, and you kind of followed it up, like, you know, like, I don't know, like having Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez in your lineup, just a big 1-2 punch. This guy's leg kicks are wild. Not to go along with the rest of his kicking game. The thing that I don't like is he drops his hands a lot when he's walking in, and he eats a ton of punishment for it.
But that's kind of why I think this is the perfect UFC debut for him. He's fighting a guy who's an absolute wild man. Someone who's going to walk forward, eat punches to give his own power shots, going to create fun scrambles, because in Brito, it's really hard to project who he can and cannot beat in the division, if we're being honest. He's so explosive and so powerful, like what we saw in the Andre Fili fight. He could probably do that to most guys in this division. Now, against the Calvin Caters of the world, like fighters up in that part of the division, he's not going to be able to. But if you're just an unranked fighter who tries to keep distance, they keep their chin up, he's going to be a dangerous fight for you. And I think with Alexander's, his skill set, it is going to be tough. It's going to make him wide open for some of those bigger explosions of Brito, and that's why I still do favor Joanderson in this fight. But I think this is a fun fight for him to be making his debut in.
Prince Vegeta's son saying Lucas is too big.
He is a big guy for the division, to be fair.
He definitely is. He opened a plus 230, he's plus 306. Joanderson Brito open minus 270. He is a minus 400 or thereabouts. And if we have a look at the votes at Fight Night Picks, 84% of Joanderson Brito. For me, can Brito not blow his load too early? He's the type of guy that likes to rush in, likes to get a quick finish, the early takedown. And when he goes and fishes for a lot of these takedowns, he can get bucked off and put into really bad spots. And once Brito's down on his back, he can get in a lot of trouble. We've seen him in those positions on the Brazilian regional scene, and then somehow he got out of them. And I don't really know how he did it. But if I look at this matchup, Lucas Alexander's fast and loose when he's on the ground going for his own submissions. And he is a guy at a Fusion XL with a guy like Adolfo Vieira that you're going to learn from, and Phil Rowe as well in the higher weight classes. But I don't know how it translates, because I look at Lucas Alexander and I look at a guy like AJ Dobson coming up next weekend, and I just have a lot of question marks about their ground game. It was great on the regional scene. I don't know how it translates in the UFC. So I like Joanderson Brito in the matchup.
You promoted this fight like you're Jeff Munson. One
guy
finishes fast and the other guy's fast and loose. So you gotta watch out.
Alexander's got a shot, but I have Brito. You have Brito as well?
I do, but I couldn't agree more. Like, Alexander and his style of striking is going to give him a chance. He has a puncher's chance, but that's all I believe he has in this fight.
Bartholomew saying that Brazilian regional scene is going to be juicy. Juicy J on a roll. What a guy. Nick Maximov taking on Jacob Malkoun. So there was a commenter this week that said, you guys are too positive at the end of all your videos. Stop previewing all the fights. Stop getting so excited. Some of them aren't very good.
I wasn't all that positive.
And then in this video, we were bullish on it. I mean, the matchup's not that great. And then a guy commented and said, you guys were too negative about this one. I'm going to stop watching. Sorry, pal. I mean, you look at this one. These two are wrestler, grappler types that don't earn finishes in the UFC.
The cure for anxiety, or the cure for insomnia might be this fight.
It's not the best fight that I've ever seen. It could end up playing out on the feet and getting fun, but it's not the best one I've ever seen.
This isn't going to be a fun fight. Like, I'm sorry to the guy who doesn't like our videos now, because we're honest. You're right, Jacob Malkoun likes to wrestle. You know what you have to be really good at to be a fun fighter who wrestles? Ground and pound, advancing past guard, submission ability. You know, the things that result in fights ending before they go to the judges. Nick Maximov, for instance, what's he really good at? Ground control time. He'll get past the full guard. Doesn't do a lot with it, though. He'll threaten with a submission from time to time. But, like, for the most part, these are two guys who employ that lead blanket type of a style. They want to get on top of you. They want to weigh you down. And I think a weighted blanket's kind of nice. They're weird, but, like, some people hate them, and I kind of understand that. People are going to hate this fight. That's all I'm going to say. Like, this isn't the greatest fight of all time.
Guys is riled the F up about it. Looking most forward to this one on the card.
It's a real do or die fight. That's what I will say. Like, both guys are going to have to show up and be their best. Because I do feel like a lot of people have a similar opinion to what Craig and I have been talking about with this fight. These are two guys. They're not that exciting. They really do need a win because of the camps that they're associated with and sort of the superstars of the sport that they're associated with. So maybe that does open up the opportunity for them to show up and really understand, like, hey, I have to make my mark on the sport. I can't just resort to being the Robin to Robert Whittaker in Jacob Malkoun's case, or Nick Diaz in Nick Maximov's case. So maybe for those reasons, it could be a fun fight, but I don't think it will be. I just think Nick Maximov is the slightly better grappler once it does hit the mat, and for that reason, I have him in the fight.
So I'm going to go through the comments really quick. Josh Ayers saying, I'm so torn in this matchup. I feel like I have a horrible record betting against Malkoun. I'm leaving Maximov. I do too. And I have Malkoun in the matchup because I think his wrestling's going to win out, which is weird because Australian wrestling is good. It's fine. But Nick Maximov, obviously, Clackamas College, All-American. He's got wrestling in his back pocket from high school all the way up. I just think where it translates into MMA, Malkoun might have a better style. And I like his cardio quite a bit, where Maximov can kind of just start to run on fumes in the third round. I like Malkoun with the cardio. And Cody Ewell saying the analysis of the fight is cool and all. But can I get a take on the nickname? Malkoun has the nickname Mamba because he was a giant fan of Kobe Bryant, and I'm not going to slag on him on that one. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. You can't be like White Mamba, like Brian Scalabrine. That one's already been done.
Matt Bonner.
The Red Mamba, Matt Bonner, former Toronto Raptor great, Matt Bonner. But yeah, in this one, I do have Malkoun. He is a slight underdog in the matchup. Maximov open minus 140, minus 135. Malkoun coming in around a plus 111 right now. And if we have a look at Fight Night picks, don't forget, Maximov was in a co-main event not that long ago against Puna Soriano.
That was a string of co-main events that were a little suspect.
61% of the fans have Maximov to get the win. So Clay has Malkoun for strength, cardio, and the odds. Went with him by decision. And Airdog saying the Red Rocket. And Joe is saying yo. And Josh is saying Matt Bonner, the Red Rocket. Raptors legend. Matt, our next fight, we have this impossible fight of the night. A lot of people, just like I was on Maximov Malkoun, I was a little bit bullish on it. People are bullish on Brandon Davis. But again, may I remind you, he fought Zabit and Giga Chikadze in his first round in the UFC. Like, y'all must have forgot. Then he beat a bunch of guys on the regional scene that weren't very good. And then he didn't look very good against Dana Bakary. But MMA fans tend to have a short frame of mind, or they'll forget about what you did. You're only as good as your last performance. Case in point, Giga Chikadze. But when I look at this matchup, Matt, don't forget about Mana Martinez, the second to last fight. He looked pretty bad against Guido Canetti, and he pulled out a split decision win like a rabbit out of a hat.
But is Guido Canetti past the age of 42 the greatest fighter we've ever seen? That is a question we now have to ask ourselves, and it hasn't been proven wrong yet. So I'm going to create that as my excuse. You are right, but that's the thing about both these guys. They have sort of the A version and the B version of themselves. Now, with Martinez, I guess not really. It's just, does his skill set work against any given opponent, or does it not? And I do think Brandon Davis is a stationary target that is going to allow Martinez to accentuate his punching power, which is by far the biggest X factor of his game, and his number one skill set, I would say, especially in a matchup like this, because Brandon Davis is going to throw a lot of pitter-patter shots at you, and don't get me wrong, he doesn't have terrible power by any means. He has good power, but he still does require a lot of volume to really go out there and get a type of finish.
Anthony, Brandon Davis is the Ronson of this card.
But that's the thing. For Davis, he does have that really nice boxing skill set, but he does get backed up a lot. And when he does get backed up, he starts to fight in a much more panicked manner. He doesn't really seem as loose. He tenses up a little bit. And that's when he can be susceptible to getting hit by the big shot like we saw his last time out against Bakary. So I think there is a world where, yes, Brandon Davis goes out there, puts his cardio on showcase, goes to the body of Martinez a lot, uses the clinch, which might be weird because you're assuming as the longer fighter, he would have more success on the outside. But I think closing the distance might be beneficial sometimes to try to put out some of the power of Martinez. But I still see him walking into a lot of power shots. That's the problem with Brandon Davis. I see him eating a lot of power shots, and unlike Julian Erosa, who's been able to have this like late career resurgence where his chin's got a lot better, he's just figured out ways to kind of avoid that one part of his game that he does struggle with. I don't think Brandon Davis has been able to improve those other areas of his game.
Davis does a lot of what Mike Jackson will do, which might sound strange, but hear me out. He tends to keep his hands fairly low when he's backing up. It's not that his head comes up a lot, but he tries to shoulder roll to this side, to his left side, and he leaves his head up. He can get hit there, and he holds his hands up almost like if you had boxing gloves on and you can block with them right about chin height. And to me, I don't really like that, especially with Mana Martinez. When he's backing up this way, it not only opens up the right hook, but he can get full extension on the left hook, Ken Mana Martinez. I just think it's a bad recipe against a guy like this. Now, Davis can weaponize his cardio like we talked about, and I saw just my 2 cents to back it up a little bit, saying Maximov will out-scramble him. He's the bigger, stronger, more dogged wrestler, definitely a better wrestler. Malkoun can only out-wrestle non-wrestlers. Malkoun out-wrestled Brennan Allen and nearly won that fight. It was a split decision. And you could have made a really good case that Malkoun won it. It surprised the hell out of me. Mana Martinez opened at par. He's a minus 160 favorite. Brandon Davis opened at par. And he's a plus 132 underdog. Kyle is saying buy low on Davis. Kyle, I don't know if I've ever seen you in the chat before, so thanks for joining in. If this is your first time commenting, we thank you. 83% of the voters at Fight Night Picks have Martinez. I have Martinez here. Ryan is saying, yo, boys, I'm sorry. And Clay is saying my pick is Mana, but I'm not too confident. So I have Martinez here.
I have Martinez as well, but again, this is an unranked featherweight battle between two guys who are going to stand up and throw power shots. So it's definitely one of those fights that could go either way, but I still do favor Mana Martinez ever so slightly.
Whoops is saying, love betting both sides by split. My favorite comment is, this guy's going to win by split decision. Are you that much of a galaxy brain that you know that two judges are going to go one way and another judge is going to go the other? Picking splits is wild. I don't know how people do it. Matt, the next fight, we have Misha Cirkunov taking on Alonzo Menifield. And this one had commenters split all throughout the week.
And how could it not? Because these two guys have complete opposite styles and basically have nothing in common whatsoever. Now, I do think Misha Cirkunov is going to have one of those, like, back against the wall type of performances, okay? I expect him to be aggressive. I think we're going to get a good version of Misha.
Looked amped up.
He did look amped up. The problem is, everything surrounding Misha Cirkunov's career up until this point isn't great. Like, he, was a once promising star, had some losses to some other promising stars, never quite got over the hump, you remember the Johnny Walker fight? That was sort of his last chance to really get over it and become a relevant fighter in the division. Loses that fight by knockout, goes on the weird journey down to 185, and now he's come back up in weight. He hasn't looked good in a meaningful period of time, and he hasn't had a stoppage win in years and years and years. Now, yes, you can point to the last one that he has over Jimmy Crute and say, wow, that's a high-level opponent. He looked really good in that fight. But the problem I have with that performance is Jimmy Crute's the one who initiated the grappling in it. And I don't think Alonzo Menifield's going to initiate the grappling with Misha Cirkunov. So, as a result, I think Misha's going to have to try to shoot for a lot of takedowns in this fight. Now, is he the better wrestler? Of course he's the better wrestler in this matchup. The problem is, Alonzo Menifield's not worried about anything that Misha Cirkunov's throwing back at him on the feet. I really do think Misha has regressed with his striking in a very similar way to a guy like Marcin Tybura. I brought that up for his last fight, and I do feel like they have had very similar career trajectories, if you will.
The two things for me, you see out of Cirkunov, a lot of his training spent with a lot of wrestlers, Drysdale BJJ. He went over to the East Coast to work out a little bit before his last fight. It very much is grappling intensive. And you saw against Wellington Turman, like, again, y'all must have forgot, Wellington Turman gets a performance bonus. Misha's all over him for the first round and the first half of the second round. Gets into the takedown position. He's on top or gets into top control. And then Wellington gets that arm for a brief second. Misha taps really quick, and that's the end of the fight. Like, Cirkunov didn't look bad in that fight. The fight against Krzysztof Jotko, he just chained takedowns together as best he could, and Jotko kept kind of peeling off and getting back up. It wasn't the best fight that we've ever seen before, but I look at this fight where I wouldn't think Menifield's going to go for takedowns. I didn't think Jessica Rose Clark was going to go for takedowns against Stephanie Edgar. And she did it, and she got submitted. So if Menifield comes in with a game plan of, okay, I trained with Fortis MMA, Saif Saud's already 1-0 in the night with Sam Hughes getting that win over Piera Rodriguez. We're going to be riding high into this one. And Menifield can bring in that Janjira Muay Thai kickboxing or Muay Thai style that he has training with a guy like the Elbow King, Chidi Njokuani, is fighting against Disco Todorovic. I think that, yeah, Menifield can have a pretty darn good shot in this one. It does feel quite volatile. Kyle, again, the Kyles are kind of going at it. Kyle James, Kyle, and Kyle Kelly. But Misha had me dying in the interviews talking about, we'll see about the second round, LOL. Canadian wrestling, best known for Bret the Hitman Hart.
One of the greats.
In the Neidhart family. Matt, the fans on this one, 82% with Alonzo Menifield.
And I do understand that. Like,
And Cimarron is saying, is this fight your most common one, Craig? No, it's not, because both guys are finishers, and Alonzo Menifield can get himself into compromising positions in certain fights. Cirkunov plus 170. Menifield is a minus 210.
Misha Cirkunov right now is like when Brandon Roy signed with the Timberwolves in like 2013, 2014, okay? It's like, wow, it's cool he's still on the court. It's cool
Started off pretty good, too.
He played like 11 games and like wasn't that good. So for Misha, I just think he's very, very, very far past his prime. And like Carmelo Anthony signed me as a free agent type territory. So I like Alonzo Menifield in this matchup, and I do expect him to probably win by finish.
Matt, everybody's just hopping and popping over in that chat. We're almost up to 400 people watching for an 11-fight set with Grasso and Araujo as your main event. Toss a like up there. If you can't hit up the super chat, it would mean a lot to us. We're going to talk about a ledge and a possible ledge. Victor Henry. He's a ledge in Japan, but like a band in the 80s saying you're big in Japan, or like that song with Dragonette, you got to do it over here. And for Victor Henry, did he ever do it against Raoni Barcelos his last time out? And for Raphael Assuncao, he's lost 4 in a row. Ricky Simone leveled up into striking, beat the brakes off him. Cody Garbrandt knocked him out cold with that walk-away knockout. He just hasn't looked like the same old Raphael in a meaningful period of time. And for Assuncao, very well-rounded, throws decent power on the feet, but not known for his knockout ability.
When he really sits down, he can. It's just not really a part of his style, exactly.
That is. And Kurt Tar is saying Assuncao might just be washed. He might just be a 40-year-old bantamweight who's had so many miles on that odometer that the engine just might be shutting down. Those injectors not working all that great.
And not every athlete gets old at the same rate. Like with Assuncao, he is pretty old in his career. Like he is in his 40s. And at this weight class, the fact that he's been able to last deep into his 30s really is quite impressive, that he was able to compete at such a high level. But he is kind of starting to go on his decline, if you will. This is his Albert Pujols with the Dodgers. Now, I know Pujols looked good afterwards, set a record. Yeah, he had that real late career resurgence. But every good athlete is going to have this point in their career unless they retire after they win like MVP and Finals MVP. So for Assuncao, he definitely is on the back nine of his career. It's really weird where the odds are right now, because with Victor Henry, he looked dominant his last time out. He looked great against Raoni Barcelos. Like, that was a beautiful UFC debut to have. It was about as good as you can possibly look under those circumstances, beating a guy who not a lot of people want to fight because he's a dangerous, unranked fighter. But the thing is about Raoni, he can look really good sometimes, and he can also not look all that great and fight up to his fullest potential. So maybe that was a night where Raoni wasn't on the ball, Victor Henry showed up at his best version, and maybe that's why the odds are very heavily skewed towards Victor Henry, because I do feel like for just the amount of experience Assuncao's had against top levels of competition, I don't think he's going to get finished in this matchup. And for that reason alone, I feel like Victor Henry being a minus 400 favorite is a little bit surprising.
It does seem a little wild. Now, I'll bring up the fan vote, just looking at the old cellular device. And on this matchup, 78% of the fans going with Henry, 22% with Raphael Assuncao. And again, Henry is a minus 400 in the matchup. You have Assuncao to plus 300 in the chat. Matt, Alex Fox, got to pull the Peyton Manning, leave on a championship level. It's like David Ortiz in his last season, like left on a really high. How old was he? I don't know, but left on a very high. Kyle Donnybrook over in the chat. Yeah, there definitely is. Kyle going with Raphael Assuncao in the matchup. I like Victor Henry because I don't know if a 35-year-old took a level up in his striking, but when I watched all the tape getting ready for his debut, he didn't strike like that over in the four-sided ring over with Ryzen. He didn't strike like that when he was with Dream. Like, he didn't look that good in the striking. He looked that good in the grappling. Like, he really did look like a superb grappler, a guy that's just teaching the class down at CMMA, and I did like that out of him. If he can bring that along with the striking in a matchup like Assuncao, and he still has the speed for what it's worth at 35. I think he can just kind of run circles around Assuncao. Now, Assuncao could come out and have a great performance, but I do like Henry here.
I agree. And for Assuncao, this is an important fight. Like, if he loses this, it's over. You'd have to think. Like, every other opponent he's lost to on this run, there's an excuse for it. It's like, okay, he's a prospect on the rise. They're a budding contender themselves. But with Victor Henry, he's a talented fighter. But Victor Henry's not some prospect that we just learned about, like, 2 weeks ago. Like, Victor Henry's been around for a long time in the regional scene, has a ton of experience.
Beat
like
Kyler Phillips at one point.
Exactly. So, for Henry, this would be a huge win for him on his record, and I do expect him to pick it up.
Well, Matt, when we do look at this matchup, it should be fun. And if Assuncao loses, maybe the PFL signs him, say they're going to get him to fight, like, a prospect, and then give him, like, Shane Burgos.
I was just about to say, yeah, that he fights Shane Burgos. That'd be great.
Poor Marlon. Matt, this one is a volatile matchup, and there's a blue hair dye, thing on the line if we don't get a finish here. But Jordan Wright taking on Dusko Todorovic, and I want to hear from the fans here because, again, this is another one of those fights that went either way in the comment section. You expect the winner to get a finish. 53% with Dusko, 47% with Jordan Wright in the fan vote.
Yeah, someone's getting knocked out. That's pretty much all I can guarantee in this fight. This fight, more than any other on the card, I think is going to end inside the distance. Now, probably wouldn't have bet our hair on it if that wasn't the case, but I just think it's going to be an interesting fight to see how Jordan Wright does respond and what range is he going to fight at. Because Jordan Wright, when he's a relaxed fighter, can be a very effective one. The problem is, Jordan Wright, when he's a tense fighter, is not a very effective one. And he does get hit by big power shots. And he does show enough lapses defensively to make you really worried about predicting him in basically any single matchup. And in a fight like this, where I do expect both guys to just be winging a lot of power shots, now, Dusko more so being the one who's going to wing them, because I do think he is going to have to find a way to fight inside the range of Jordan Wright. Now, if he does just blitz him like he did against Daquan Townsend, Daquan's not the best, let's just be honest, but if he does fight the way that he fought Daquan, that's a fighter who at the time I thought had a lot of promise and had a fairly high ceiling in the division, if I'm being honest.
Who?
Dusko.
Oh, I thought you said Daquan.
No. When Dusko had beat Daquan,
Yeah.
I know Daquan didn't look good, and I wasn't a big, Daquan guy in the UFC, but he just looked good in that match. He was confident. He was walking him down, and he never really put him down with one big shot. It was just an accumulation of a lot of those inside power shots, and that gave you reason to be really confident in his future. But he also isn't the most durable guy in the world. And when you fight like Dusko Todorovic fights, you've got to have a chin like a Justin Gaethje or like a Kamaru Usman up until recently. So that's always the thing about Dusko. In a brawl, it gives him the best chance to win, but in a brawl, he can also get clipped.
And I see it up there in the comment section, you guys saying karate doesn't fit in the UFC. I mean, Wonderboy almost won a title with karate, but when you focus on Dusko, his background is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he has a black belt, and Taekwondo, and he has a black belt. So Taekwondo sometimes does well, like Anthony Pettis or Benson Henderson, but for the rest of fighters, it's an additional martial art to have.
If there's only one ever who's had success, or like two, it's not the most promising.
Well, when we do have a look at the odds, again, the fan vote is split 53% with Dusko to the Jordan Wright, and Jordan Wright is a decent underdog, plus 174, 175, Dusko plus 215, 216, so listen, if you do like the underdog, I guess there's decent value on Jordan Wright. Expecting a finish here. I would be surprised if Wright comes out like he did in his last fight and tries to wrestle Dusko, because I think he's going to struggle there, just like he did against Barrio. I think if he strikes and he throws a lot of kicks, as I catch my phone on my lap.
Hands over
yeah, the people can't see that, but that happened. I do have Dusko here. I think he's going to be able to win out, but it's a super volatile fight. It's pop and popcorn if I've ever seen a matchup.
This is the most heavyweight, non-heavyweight fight on the card. I don't even think there is a heavyweight fight on the card.
No, there's not.
Exactly. This is your heavyweight. It should be the co-main event, because that's what the UFC loves to do. Whoever lands first clean is probably going to win this fight. I ever so slightly do favor Dusko, because he does throw combinations once he gets on the inside, and I think that's going to be important. If he was more of a single shot guy, Jordan Wright can avoid one punch. It's when you start throwing them in combinations when he does struggle defensively with some of those movements, so that's why I like Dusko.
Fat Joe, the kid's got the lean back. Matt, we look at Askarov, Brandon Royval. Oh, wait, no, we don't, because Askarov couldn't make the weight. Didn't want that catch weight fight. Askarov. He's kind of like your friend. He's kind of one of those guys. He's the pull-out king. He's that guy, Askarov. Having a hard time making those fights, Matt.
Is he proud of that?
Cub Swanson taking on Jonathan Martinez. This is a banger. And if you didn't watch the Cub Swanson piece that came out this week, I thought it was pretty cool. Some people watched it. A lot of people didn't. But Cub Swanson is a Hall of Famer in 2022. The fight of the year in 2016 against Doo Ho Choi made it in. It got inducted.
So good.
In this matchup against Jonathan Martinez, style for style, this is a great one. 135. Both guys made weight. Thought that Cub Swanson's still wearing sunglasses on the The interviews on Wednesday, on the scale on Friday, it was a little weird.
Corey Hart guy.
Jonathan Martinez looked a little gaunt on the scale on Friday, so there is that. Matt, this should be a fun fight. What do you make of it?
I do believe both guys struggle to make weight. That's always been the story about Jonathan Martinez. Incredibly talented fighter, but he basically fights 2 fights every single week. He has to fight the scales and then get into an actual fist fight. Now, luckily, he's facing an opponent who went through the exact same struggle that he did. I don't think this was an easy weight cut for Cub Swanson. I don't even think Cub Swanson's biggest believers, his camp, I don't even think Swanson would admit that this was an easy weight cut whatsoever.
I think it's ride or die. Dan Argueta would say anything for him.
Exactly. Dan Argueta is the type of friend that you want to have in your life, but for Cub Swanson, he would even admit that this is probably a very difficult weight cut for him to have at this stage of his career, and the fact that the last time we saw him get finished in the cage, it was by a body shot. Now, Giga Chikadze is a huge featherweight. He's a borderline lightweight, and he is a big fighter who hits very hard in his division. Jonathan Martinez is a huge fighter in his division who could probably fight a division above where he does, and he does throw a lot of those same techniques that a guy like Giga can threaten with. Now, if Cub Swanson does go out there, throw a lot of hip tosses, get really weird with his movement, have a lot of success that way, really use his athleticism, because that's the thing about Cub Swanson. Yes, he does box, he's got this weird movement with his hands down low, but he can shift side to side. If his athleticism and if his explosiveness does get affected by the weight cut and by the age, Cub Swanson's the type of athlete who you do worry just falls off a cliff quite immediately. Now, he's not the fighter he once was, so of course there has been some diminish to his skill set over the past few years, but we haven't seen such a drastic incline that makes us think he can't still be competitive with guys like Jonathan Martinez.
And that's the thing. I mean, Jack saying Hope Cub had a good rehydration.
100%.
He looked like he didn't have an ounce of fat on his body. No policing. I think Cub is locked in for sure. And I see a lot of people saying Cub Swanson by knockout, and the recent string might have you believe, but if you go back and watch the fights, Daniel Pineda dominates the first round, and he's completely gassed in the last minute of that first round. Second round, he had no legs to stand on. He gets finished. The fight against Darren Elkins, that man's absorbed the damage. And before that, he went from 2013 to 2020 without a finish. He had a couple of knockdowns against Hakran Diaz, but it was Dennis Seaver all the way, or without a knockout finish. It was Dennis Seaver all the way up to Daniel Pineda, and then Darren Elkins. So is he known as a power puncher? Not necessarily. It's more the accumulation of volume and then picking his power shots as the fight goes on.
And I agree with the comment Fender Jazz put. The fact that Martinez's beautiful striking technique and that his kicks don't have any telegraph. It's really hard to figure out when Jonathan Martinez is trying to punch you or whether he's trying to kick you. That's a pretty effective skill to have at this division. So for Cub, there's just too many red flags around him and this weight cut down to the division. Now, maybe he does look like a Jose Aldo where he's late in his career. He makes the move down to 135 and he does look good enough to be competitive with some of the top guys in the division. The difference is Jose Aldo is one of the greatest fighters of all time. Cub Swanson is one of the most exciting fighters of all time, but I wouldn't necessarily say that he was ever as skilled as some of the all-time GOATs. So for Cub, I think he can make this an exciting fight, but I do think that at a certain point, whatever offense he can muster up in the first few rounds, first few minutes, isn't going to be sustainable.
To me, it's the kicks as well. But I mean, you can make a strong argument either way. I'm here to listen to it. If you have Martinez, if you have Swanson, minus 215 on Martinez, plus 175 or thereabouts on Swanson. The fan vote here in the chat, 52% with Martinez. So it is very, very close. The one and only saying Martinez's chin will always hold him back. He lost to Davey Grant by finish, so there was that one. But I mean, Davey Grant's a tough out, even as old as he is. And hey, Marlon Vera lost to him once and then beat him once, and everybody likes Marlon Vera now, so Martinez could be the next guy.
Davey Grant could offer a tough fight to anybody in the division.
I mean, Aljamain Sterling, Davey Grant, who doesn't want to see that?
Kyle Kelly, yes I do. I didn't say double champ. I said he would be top 15 in either division. I might have said both, I'm not going to lie.
So a little bit of bias there, possibly. Matt, our main event, we have Alexa Grasso take on Viviane Araujo. And this is a tough one, because if you look at Alexa Grasso, there's certain fights where she struggles with pressure and power in the boxing category, and there's certain fights where she just kind of forgets about what she's doing and decides to just brawl, and she had a lot of success against Macy Barber in doing that. Now, as that fight wore on, Barber started to have more success of her own, but if you look at the last fight against Joanne Calderwood, Grasso struggled with the pressure of Wood, but then mixed in her own takedowns and submitted Wood.
The old Uno reverse card.
Something that we never have seen out of Alexa Grasso in her entire MMA career. That was her first win by submission. That's not going to work against Viviane Araujo, who's a black belt in luta livre and Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
thing about Viviani is she doesn't fight like that, though. She really goes out there and tries to use her boxing, use her forward pressure, use her physicality to really wear on her opponent. And against a lot of fighters, that can work in this division. But against fighters who have really good footwork or good boxing skills that can at least put enough bugs on the windshield, to use a Teddy Atlas term, to try to get her to stop her forward movement, it does work. She's not this invulnerable fighter who can walk through a lot of shots just to land her own power shots. She doesn't fight like Justin Gaethje, even though I would say their skill sets are somewhat complementary. She just... It is weird. Like, you would assume someone like Viviani would be able to walk through a lot of the power of her opponents and try to throw in combination a lot more, but she does remind me a little bit, and... feel free to disagree with me if I'm wrong on this. She fights a little bit like Paul Felder. Good but not great power. Good hand speed, not great hand speed. Good combos, not great combos. Like, if everything's clicking with her game offensively, then yes, she can be very, very dangerous, I should say. But if you get rid of any of those three, she doesn't necessarily become as dangerous. She isn't someone who can just run across the cage and get a takedown. She is going to have to be in the clinch for a little bit and really work for a lot of her techniques, and her cardio can somewhat hold her back. That's why I'll be very interested to see her in this 5-round fight against Grasso, who we know can basically fight on her back foot and just recreate the Caitlin Chukagian game plan.
So, just my 2 cents, Grasso, but I feel a dodgy split coming, no action. How do you know the judges are going to disagree on rounds?
I could see it being a close fight, though.
But when I look at this one, there was also a question there earlier saying, from Joe, has Araujo ever been in a 5-rounder before? Her last fight with Pancrase for the title was a 5-round fight. She won that one by decision. That was in 2018. Then she competed on 3 straight UFC pay-per-view cards on the undercard. Sam hitting up the super chat. Can we get a pick each of you like from Dana White's Contender Series, but nothing shorter than minus 200? Matt, I don't understand that question.
What do you mean? It's pretty easy. He wants a pick of someone who's not a bigger than minus 200.
Oh, like on Dana White's Contender Series. Oh, like
I'll give you one pick for the card, sure.
Going 8 to 10.
On some sites, Alonzo Menifield's only a minus 190, and I think he's going to knock out Misha Cirkunov, so there you go.
He's an average minus 210. I
still like that one. I'm not going to lie. There's your pick.
Paint me in a corner, Sam. This has derailed the show.
He donated 10, so I felt like we had to. But I'm sticking with it. That's close enough.
Martinez. I'll go Martinez. Clay saying everyone online picking Grasso, counting Viviani, gassing. We haven't really seen her gas, so...
But she just doesn't fight at her highest pace the whole time, and I think that's the problem. Like, for you to gas in a fight, you have to fight at a very, very high work rate. Think of, like, Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero. Paulo's shown the ability to fight 5 rounds pretty easily. In that fight, he looked tired at the end of the 3rd round. You know why? Because he threw 400 punches leading up until that point. So, for Viviani, she doesn't fight in that manner, and that's why she might not gas per se, but she never fights at such a high pace that makes me really think, wow, she's at risk of gassing in the future. So I still think for that reason her gas tank is somewhat untested. The only thing I do feel comfortable in saying is I do think Alexa Grasso's a better conditioned athlete out of these two, just because it's such a big part of her game. She needs the volume. She really does need the footwork, and I think those two things directly help you with your cardio.
Claude Bartman coming in over the top ropes, asking if I'm going to get 5 right this week. Claude Bartman, I was 7-4 on the last card, and you're a donkey. So Matt, in this one, I do have Grasso. I think the accumulation of volume will win it out for her. Obviously, it was mentioned earlier on, the drop that you had for Andrea Lee against Araujo gives you pause, but then right after that, a quick comeback from Araujo to get the win. But again, she struggled in certain matchups with the threat of the takedown and also the accumulation of volume in some of her fights. So for me, I do like Grasso in the matchup, but I see it as a close one. And again, if you really do like the underdog in Araujo here, I'm not going to fault you one bit. Some of these fights are really hard to pick, and if you get this one right with a decent underdog, kudos to you. I mean, last weekend, you had most everyone siding with Dern, and it really was the pressure and the volume of Yan Xiaonan that was able to win out, and that was actually 2 weeks ago. So in this matchup, it is a tough one to call. If you like the underdog, just like the main event 2 weeks ago, I'm not going to fault you for taking Araujo.
It's just weird that there's no real storylines to be created after this main event. Like, for most main events, okay, you're either getting a title eliminator next, or you're going to be fighting for the title. For the most part, there's 10 divisions, they get to fill a lot of shows. Like, you're going to get a lot of title eliminator type fights in these. I just don't know if that's what this is. Maybe it is because Shevchenko is going to need a fresh matchup at some point in her career. I just don't know if a win over Alexa Grasso, or on the flip side, if Viviani's able to win, I just don't really know what it does for either's career. You know, like, of course, it's going to get them close to that area. I'm just not necessarily sure if this gets them into that title conversation.
Malone Hart with another giant super chat, getting hyped for the card.
Malone.
You get a bonus points. Well, I certainly appreciate that, Malone Hart, and I appreciate everybody that's hit up the chat, the super chat, the likes. They are all appreciated. And Matt, we will flip this card on its head one more time, go through all of the picks, predictions, and so on and so forth, and we're getting set for UFC 280. That's next weekend, Oliveira versus Makhachev. Seems like everybody has Makhachev. You have Aljamain Sterling taking on TJ Dillashaw, and before that, Petr Yan and Sean O'Malley.
Dalla Billashaw.
To start this card, Mike Jackson takes on Pete Rodriguez.
We've talked about this fight for about 45 minutes.
Yeah, Pete Rodriguez is a minus 700. If you're going to go heavy on Pete Rodriguez, it seems like a bit of a turkey move, like a Canadian Thanksgiving move like we had last weekend. I have Rodriguez, but my God, I'd stay away from this one with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I think Pete Rodriguez can beat Mike Jackson. I don't know if there's a large pool of people in the UFC that he can beat outside of Mike Jackson, though. Like, I expect him to get the win in this matchup, and that's about it.
All right, Matt. Give him something for the super chat. Find something behind. You can give him... I gotta give him something? Like, just a piece of the set? Do you want my glasses? You know my glasses. I'll give Malone Hart my glasses. I need them to see. The next fight, Matt, Tatsuro Taira taking on CJ Vergara. Don't love the weight miss from Vergara, a guy who's traditionally a strong finisher in the third round. It didn't affect him when he missed weight against Ode Osborne, so who knows, but I do like Taira in the matchup.
Yeah, I like Tatsuro quite a bit.
All right, Matt, the next one, we have Rodriguez taking on Sam Hughes. Switch of the pick, going with the underdog, Sam Hughes.
I think Rodriguez is the more damaging striker, that's why I've got her.
Chad says the Stipe bobblehead. Chad, you don't know how much the damn Stipe bobblehead costs to get. I've got him wearing a baseball jersey with a fire hose. That almost broke the bank.
Did he get drafted? You would know this.
In baseball?
Yeah,
I don't think he did.
Okay. He played in college.
Joanderson and Brito taking on Lucas Almeida. I have Brito, but Almeida's going to be fun while it lasts.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more with that. Like, I've got Brito. I think he's the more seasoned vet. He's been in there many more times, of course, because it's Alexander's UFC debut. Should be a fun fight, though.
All right. Timothy's saying Sam Hughes with the big L. Maybe she gets a big L. I don't know. Nick Maximov taking on Jacob Malkoun. I'm going with Malkoun.
I have Nick Maximov, but I think this is going to be the worst fight we've ever seen inside a UFC octagon.
Mana Martinez, Brandon Davis. I have Mana Martinez.
I think this is going to be an awesome fight. Like, this fight might even look that much better because of how bad the previous fight's going to be. Like, this fight, they might just throw 5 punches around and everybody's going to be losing their minds. I've got Mana Martinez, though.
Cirkunov, Alonzo Menifield feels very explosive, especially in the first round. I do have Alonzo Menifield, but this could be a banger while it lasts.
I gotta be honest, this fight feels dirty to me. This fight feels like Alex Morono versus Cowboy Cerrone. It really does. I like Alonzo Menifield by stoppage in this fight.
Yikes, Matt. We got 100 likes. That's certainly appreciated. Assuncao taking on Victor Henry. I've got Victor Henry.
I've got Victor Henry, but I could see Assuncao putting on one of those crafty veteran performances, making it close, and not that it matters, because, again, I think Victor Henry's going to win, but having a respectable loss. You know what I mean? Like, it'll be a 29-28. It might be a controversial decision, but I do have Victor Henry.
All right, Matt. Jordan Wright's taking on Disco Todorovic in a fight where you think it's going to get finished quickly. I have Disco here, but both guys bang, and you get a finish quick.
Yeah, I've also got Disco, but this is like a 51-49 pick, where I barely have him.
Who was it there? Prince Vegeta-san saying never bet against old guys. If Guido Canetti is the old guy, but if it's Alexander Gustafsson, yikes. Cub Swanson taking on Jonathan Martinez. Everybody seems split on this one. I have J Mart, the Dragon, to get the win.
I think it's going to be an incredibly fun fight for as long as it lasts. I just think Cub Swanson struggles with rangier strikers than himself, and I think that's what Martinez poses at this weight class.
And in the main event of the evening, Alexa Grasso, Viviane Araujo, another one of those fights. You can make a good case for either one of the two. I have Grasso, but if Araujo goes out, takes her down, and just completely grounds and pounds her, we haven't seen it in the UFC, but it very well could happen based on the background. I could see Araujo getting the win, but I just like the conduciveness to a 5-round fight and the volume out of Grasso, so I'm going to go with her.
I could see Araujo going out there and really trying to use her grappling. I just think Grasso's going to be good enough defensively with her initial takedown defense so that we don't have to see her off her back, because that's the thing about her game. She's terrible when she is defending from the open guard or from her full guard off her back. There's just nothing at all. It's a lot of try to get the lockdown, look at Herb Dean as much as possible, because if you make the eye contact, there's a 5-second earlier chance they're going to pull their opponent up. She just has terrible grappling defense off her back. So I do like Alexa Grasso with her boxing ability on the feet, with her kickboxing and her movement, but this should be a fun fight.
All right, Matt, it is a big-time card that's coming up this weekend. Next weekend, UFC 280. We talked about the top 3 fights that are on that card. Obviously, everybody's excited for Carol Hossa taking on Lena Landsberg. Just a bantamweight banger that everybody can get behind. Matt, there's matchups on this card that I love. Mahmoud Muradov taking on Caio Borralho. Makayev taking on Gordon, and Nikita Krylov.
I was going to say, that's such a fun fight.
Absolute banger. And then up further on the card, Bilal Muhammad, Sean Brady.
Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley is the most do-or-die fight we have ever seen with a prospect in the UFC.
Yeah, Sean O'Malley, you lose that fight. Bye-bye.
You want to fight good fighters? You got to fight Petr Yan coming off a loss.
Well, make sure you check out the video as soon as it drops. The likes, they're always appreciated. The comments over in the chat and down below in the comment section after the videos are over. It is certainly appreciated from all of you. Hopefully you have a wonderful weekend. You're set for UFC 280. You're set for Fight Night Cater versus Allen to round out the month. It should be a lot of fun. Matt, keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. And as we always say,
let's get into it.